All right, so hello and welcome back. So it's been a hot minute. I've been busy, let's just say the least. So making research papers and all that fun stuff. If you guys want to, you know, listen to those, I can whip something up. But otherwise, we're going to continue the series. We're going to go hunt for the Bismarck. Last time, Bismarck was intercepted and they had their little battle, and the hood went down. So let's continue.
It's late May of the year 1941. A two-ship German battle group attempts to break off into the Atlantic on its mission to raid Allied merchant convoys. But due to an unplanned string of events, German commander Admiral Lütjens is compelled into facing the Royal Navy's home fleet, attempting to prevent the Bismarck from entering the open Atlantic. A fierce artillery trade-off ensued, resulting in the sinking of HMS Hood, a symbolic British warship. Enraged, the Royal Navy now employs every possible means to track down and destroy the German raiders. The hunt has begun. It is the cool, breezy morning of the 24th of May, 1941. A mere hour has passed since the German task force sank the iconic HMS Hood and considerably damaged another British capital ship, HMS Prince of Wales, forcing her to retreat. Both German vessels saw great elation among their crews following the spectacular victory. But the commander of the battle group, Admiral Lütjens, was already preoccupied sketching plans for the immediate future, as he had no doubt that the threat posed by the Royal Navy was only temporarily deterred. The most impending problem for the Germans was the damage that the Bismarck sustained in the course of the recent battle. Two hits dealt by the Prince of Wales caused the pride of the German Navy to both leak precious fuel and at the same time allowed a couple thousand tons of salt water into another compartment, which made her slightly list to port and down by the bow. Technically, it wasn't a huge issue though, as the ship's artillery, propulsion,
So let's get in Lucian's head a little bit here, okay? So the reason the British intercepted with two ships was because Hood and Prince of Wales were in the area and they were the fastest. They intercepted. Let's just not kid ourselves here. They got their ass beat. Hood's gone. Basically all hands. A few guys actually made it, surprisingly. Prince of Wales is having to disengage. Bismarck suffered damage. Admittedly, not as bad. However, it's still leaking oil and it is taking on water, which are very bad things now that you have pissed off the entire Royal Navy and they're coming for your, basically. If I remember correctly, they're whipping up every single unit that's even in the Atlantic to start headed towards the last known position of the Bismarck, which is a lot of ships.
and even the crew remained intact. But with less than 3,000 tons of fuel available, Lütjens had a narrow set of options to choose from. The Operation Rheinübung was no longer feasible due to the Bismarck's damage affecting her range, and the plan was no longer a secret to the Royal Navy, which, as Lütjens expected, was about to use all available means to neutralize his task force. The German admiral had to either turn and use one of the available passages to get back to the nearest friendly ports in Norway, or carry on into the North Atlantic and eventually reach the safe haven of German-occupied France.
So let's just talk about his options here. Option number one, go basically back the way they came, which is above Iceland all the way back down to Norway. To do this, they have to basically do a U-turn in a ship that has taken damage, which is not very fun, and turn it around. And this is, again, hoping that the British, surprisingly wouldn't know where they are. Just like they weren't supposed to know that they had been followed the entire time with radar. So this is assuming if they do this top route that, well, the British aren't following them with radar ships or not spy planes, but planes or any other type of intelligence that will let them know they're coming back here. Because again, the main British fleet is at Scapa Flow, which is right here. Okay, this is where the main task force is. Now, again, they're going to be out in the ocean right now, but they can redirect to intercept them this way. If you go below Iceland, there are definitely RAF bases down here that can, basically the reason they're there is to cut off both of these corridors to see if any ships come through. They will be spotted. If they do it this way, it's faster though. If they go down the route they came, or are trying to intentionally go down the first route to Saint Nazaire, it's probably the shortest route, although you are probably going to have to maybe fight anything they have. However, if you get close enough to France, you should have Luftwaffe air cover. So again, his options are not great, whatever he chooses.
The Norwegian option seemed more reasonable, but Lütjens expected the possible presence of British heavy units in the area between them and Scapa Flow and considered this route as too risky. Instead, he decided to steam towards Saint-Nazaire. The French coast was further away, but the route through the open Atlantic offered a better opportunity to shake off the British pursuers and a much better position to attack Allied convoys once the Bismarck was fully operational again. Moreover, Lütjens' success...
That's something I also didn't think about there, because the entire point of this was to get these units basically in to hunt at convoys here and then back into France to start hunting them from there. If they turned around right now, they'd have to do this operation again. And the British, would be expecting them to do it again. It's like, one time you can be fooled, but twice that's not happening.
Successfully used the French option months earlier, coming back to the port of Brest with 2 other German battlecruisers. Still, the Bismarck's group was shadowed by 2 British heavy cruisers equipped with superior radar, followed by the damaged HMS Prince of Wales. So the chase group under Admiral John Tovey had reliable information on the German positions.
Okay, let's break down this a little bit. So Bismarck is wounded. Prinz Eugen is fine. HMS Suffolk is a radar. Well, it has equipped a radar on it so it can track the Bismarck. HMS Prince of Wales disengaged from the fight, but that does not mean she's out of the fight. Those are 2 very different things. HMS Norfolk, again, is also there in support. Now, HMS Repulse is a battlecruiser, but is very old. We're talking Dreadnought era, okay? I don't remember if she even got her refits, so she's not as capable. I mean, Prince Eugen would give her a good run for her money. However, the Repulse, if she hits, is going to do significant damage. King George V, again, is the newest battleship that they actually have with Prince of Wales. HMS Victorious is a pretty decent carrier. And then HMS Rodney, it was a 1920s battleship with 16-inch guns. He is very slow, but she can pack quite a punch. So again, that's 4 capital ships versus technically 1, and then they have escorts of 2 heavy cruisers versus 1.
The problem was that Tovey's force was more than 350 miles away, and the damaged Bismarck was still able to cruise at 28 knots, about the same speed as that of the British heavy warships were capable of. Thus, unless she was slowed down, there was little chance of her being intercepted.
That's a key point. Repulse, I know for a fact, probably might be able to do it. I know for a fact Rodney cannot do that. However, Rodney's also on an intercept course. So if they come there, they can probably intercept them. However, if they break away, Rodney can't catch up. The only ones I think in this unit that can actually catch up at 28 knots is going to be King George V, Victorious, maybe Repulse, Norfolk, Prince of Wales, and Suffolk.
In the late afternoon of the 24th of May, Lütjens took advantage of a rain squall, made a sharp turn to starboard, and briefly engaged with the trailing British group, granting cover for the undamaged Prinz Eugen to detach unseen and steam away to harass Atlantic convoys.
Now, this is the point that we can't, in his head, he's trying to get Prinz Eugen into the Atlantic to break convoys, okay? However, when he does this, he has to do an entire loop around to try and engage the Suffolk and break and basically distract them from Prinz Eugen. Whereas if you kept sailing to Saint-Nazaire, you have a pretty decent chance that he actually would have gotten there without being engaged. However, doing this, he's not only burned fuel, he's slowed down, he's taken on more water. There's a lot of compounding factors.
The Bismarck resumed her original course, with all 3 British ships now trailing to her port side. But several hours later, a new threat emerged. One of Tovey's ships, aircraft carrier HMS Victorious, adjusted her course, which eventually enabled her to launch a squadron of torpedo bombers in an attempt to damage and slow down the Bismarck. Yet inexperienced pilots mistakenly prepared to attack HMS Norfolk, which alerted German anti-aircraft gunners, who immediately opened fire at the enemy. But none of the attacking planes were shot down, and the British were able to launch 9 torpedoes at the Bismarck, though only 1 reached its target, hitting the battleship's main armor belt with no significant damage. Soon, the chase entered open waters, and the pursuers were forced to adopt zigzag maneuverings in order to avoid German U-boats that might have been patrolling the area, according to British intelligence reports.
Now, when you zigzag a ship, not only are you reducing your speed, because again, you're having to zigzag, which means you reduce your speed to do this, and also because way water works and momentum. So they're having to slow down basically to avoid being sniped by U-boats that they thought were in the area. Okay, Bismarck really doesn't have this problem, mostly because I mean the British subs existed, but they weren't like in the Atlantic like sniping German convoys because there wasn't really any anyway there. So again, they could go at full steam to break off to Saint Nazaire.
As a result, the Bismarck was repeatedly out of range of Suffolk's radar. Coincidentally, Lütjens ordered a 270 turn to starboard, hoping to break off radar contact, circling behind her pursuers. Luckily, this move worked, and the German admiral adjusted his course to France, fooling the British at the same time, who upon losing radar contact, steamed west at first, and then, early in the morning, dispersed to seek the Bismarck visually. It came as a shock for the British Admiralty, as many of the Royal Navy ships were already low on fuel, and the actual position of the enemy battleship was now a mystery. From then on, the plan to neutralize the warship which sank HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, hung in the balance.
Now, the captain or Lütjens is going to make a very big mistake here, and you're kind of like, why would they do this? That's coming up. To be honest, it's kind of like out there as to why they did this, but we'll just let that happen.
But just like the British, the Germans were also making mistakes. Admiral Lütjens remained unaware of the fact that he actually got rid of his pursuit and didn't maintain radio silence, allowing code breakers at Bletchley Park to determine the Bismarck's approximate position and that she was steaming towards the French coast. Hope sparked again as the narrow search area gave a small chance to locate the Bismarck's position before she could make it safely into the range of the Luftwaffe operating from French air bases.
Now, I believe he sent messages to command, so German High Command, that like what happened, basically where Prince Eugen was in the Atlantic and Bismarck had suffered damage and has to return to the port at Saint Nazaire. Now, the problem is, because again, you have to remember, all the way back in the episode before this, they were given orders to be radio silent, because if they are detected, or radio triangulation, if you have 3 points, you can triangulate, there it is, radio triangulation on Bismarck and Prince Eugen, which is why they were given radio silence orders to go all the way around. But now he doesn't know he's broken contact because it's heavy fog. You can't really see that much. And he didn't know, so he sent the orders, and now they have at least a general idea of where he is. If he had stayed silent, probably wouldn't make it back to Saint Nazaire. But that was his second, big mistake, at least, my opinion. First one was getting Prince Eugen into the Atlantic, whereas he had to turn around, engage, and then come back. And then the second one was, again, now. So
the odds were still against the British though, as HMS Prince of Wales, Suffolk, Victorious and Repulse were forced to break off the search due to fuel shortages. This meant that Admiral Tovey's only capital ships still in action were the HMS King George V and the old battleship HMS Rodney, both far away from the Bismarck's approximate position. In the morning of the 26th of May, the British Navy had a much-needed stroke of luck, as one of the Catalina flying boats, which had flown from its base on Loch Earn in Northern Ireland, accidentally spotted the trail of the oil slick on the sea. Shortly, the Bismarck was located just short of 700 miles northwest of Brest. Seemingly, this was good news. But a position also meant that in less than a day, the Bismarck would reach the safe area covered by the Luftwaffe and U-boats. Time was running out, and the only chance the British had to intercept the German battleship was the Force H, a naval formation based in Gibraltar, under the command of Vice Admiral James Somerville.
Now, okay, in a straight fight, looking at these units, Bismarck is way superior to Renown. Renown is very old at this point and cannot fight Bismarck straight up. HMS Ark Royal is an aircraft carrier, I believe a quite old one, a decently old one, but it's still combat capable, as we will see. But a straight fight versus Renown, Bismarck would probably win. However, Bismarck is damaged, and a lot of their gun shit just isn't working at this point. So,
as soon as Somerville was informed of the Bismarck's position, he detached a light cruiser, HMS Sheffield, to shadow the enemy and commanded the carrier, HMS Ark Royal, to immediately launch torpedo bombers. But the first squadron was not informed of Sheffield's orders and mistook it for the Bismarck. Luckily, the drop torpedoes were equipped with new yet unreliable magnetic detonators, and HMS Sheffield remained unscathed. Subsequently, the second squadron of Swordfish was launched, but this time equipped with older contact detonators.
Should have wish the U.S. would have done that with their torpedoes. We would have had not as much of a debacle as we did with them, but...
On this occasion, the aviators picked the target correctly, and despite heavy anti-aircraft fire, the torpedo attack finally yielded some results. The Bismarck was hit twice, as one torpedo hit mid-ship with minor damage, and another exploded at the stern, jamming both battleship's rudders. Damage control teams managed to repair the starboard one, but the port rudder remained blocked at a turning position. This meant that the Bismarck lost her maneuverability and was unable to escape, being just a few hundred miles away from the safe zone. But even with crippled mobility, her powerful armaments and fire control systems were intact, a sufficient reason for bigger British vessels to keep their distance. 6 destroyers kept the Bismarck busy with torpedo attacks during the night, but it was not until the next morning when the final battle occurred. Eventually, the 3 remaining ships of Admiral Tovey's home fleet loomed on the grey horizon, preparing for a final battle. HMS Rodney and HMS King George V.
Okay, so here's something a little bit different with Rodney. Rodney has an all-forward armament, which means that if she sails in a direct line, or even, well, ideally it's like 45-degree angle, giving you the most protection, she basically has her, and she's also, I think, the only ship in the British, well, her and her sister ship, are both armed with 16-inch guns. Remember, it's three 16-inch guns, so 9 16-inch guns. So she can technically sail at a 45-degree angle and engage. She's old, from the 20s, and not very fast, but she's very heavily armored and has a lot of guns. King George V, again, has a turret in the back with a quad, and then has 1, 2, and 1, 4 in the front, so she can technically engage from the front. And then the other ship, I think Renown, is going to come in.
Drew and fired first salvos at the slow-moving Bismarck. The German battleship returned fire with her forward turrets, yet managed to only fire short of HMS Rodney, as her ability to aim accurately was somewhat decreased due to erratic movement caused by the jammed rudder. But the British shells soon reached their target, causing initial damage and fires to break out on board. The 2 heavy cruisers joined the battle and aimed their turrets at the strafed German battleship. For the next 90 minutes, the Bismarck suffered relentless British fire as hundreds of shells struck the venerable German battle vessel, causing massive damage to the ship and huge casualties to the crew.
Now, I want you to remember this. The reason that Bismarck was pinned like this was because of an aircraft. But an aircraft did not actually do enough damage to sink Bismarck. They just put it in the position for the battleships to actually do their job, and the heavy cruisers as well. This, even in 41, was why people were still building battleships, and there was not like this whole craze of, oh my god, aircraft carriers are like the best thing ever. That will come later, and it's more of a Pacific thing. It's definitely more of a Pacific thing because of the large oceans. The Atlantic is different because, again, air bases are, on the land, and they're not that far away, which is why you needed battleships, which is why they built them.
Despite this persisting cannonade and detonating the scuttling charges by her crew, the Bismarck refused to sink. As Tovey's warships were dangerously low on fuel and shells, he sent them back to port, leaving HMS Dorsetshire to finish the job. Eventually, at 10:39 on the 27th of May, the Bismarck went under the waves. A little more than 100 of her sailors were rescued, while the majority that managed to abandon the sinking Bismarck were left to the mercy of the water, as British ships left the scene after the U-boat alarm. More than 2,000 German sailors shared the fate of the iconic battleship.
And there's something they just say about the U-boat is like a one-off quote. It actually was a serious threat. So when the British, the commanders on the field, the destroyer guys, said that they wanted to stop and try to help the survivors, because that's what you do as a navalman, okay? One of the destroyers did. That's why there was at least 100 survivors. Some other ships helped as well. However, they were ordered to get underway immediately because they didn't know where the U-boat threat was. A sitting destroyer in the middle of the Atlantic is a prime target for a torpedo to hit. And if that hits, that whole ship's going down and everyone with it. That's why they were given the order to, again, as harsh as it sounds, to abandon these sailors to their fate and continue on home.
The loss of the Bismarck was a heavy blow for the Kriegsmarine and also became a turning point in the war on Allied commerce convoys, as from that point on, German Naval Command abandoned the idea of using capital ships for raiding in favor of U-boats, which wreaked havoc on the northern Atlantic for the next 2 years. Still, the famous 8-day-long voyage of the Bismarck became a highlight of the Battle of the Atlantic and one of the most popular events of the Second World War in Europe.
So I'll stop and read this, but if you guys want to check out, I'll see you next time. So, both HMS Prince of Wales whose shells damaged the Bismarck and repulsed, which took part in the Bismarck pursuit, were sunk just half a year later in the Japanese air attack on the South China Sea. Yes, this is true. Monumentally stupid what happened there, but it happened. And number two, the Bismarck captain Ernst Linderman often argued with Admiral Lutyens regarding strategic and tactical decisions. He lobbied to pursue HMS Prince of Wales after sinking Hood, and also advised to steam back towards Norway rather than France. Lutyens had his own vision, though, and rarely listened to his subordinates, which is an admiral in charge of the whole fleet, that you have the authority to do so. And then, let's see what third is. Soon after sinking Bismarck, moves were made to court-martial Admiral Wake Walker and Captain John Litch of HMS Prince of Wales for the retreat following the destruction of Hood. The idea was quickly scuppered, as the home fleet commander John Tovey threatened his superiors with resignation if such actions came into fruition, which is a good sticking up for a naval officer. I don't know why they thought. I mean, Wales had taken serious damage, and they had lost the pride of the fleet, and the admiral too, and basically everyone on Hood. There was no staying there. I mean, why would you stay there to die? That doesn't make any sense, but hey. So, hope you guys like my video. Hope you like my reaction. Click on the link down below if you want to watch the full thing uninterrupted from Baz Battle. Probably should tell that in the beginning, but hey. Otherwise, I'll see you people next time. See you later.